There's a wonderful passage in Anne Frank's diary that I believe might be real helpful for us as we try to understand the scriptures this weekend. We all remember that she was a teenage Jewish girl who lived in Amsterdam during the early years of World War II. And when the Germans were rounding up all the Jews, she and her family went into hiding. They were 7 people in all, and they hid for 2 years in an attic. There they waited in daily fear of being discovered by the Nazis. And it was during that time that Anne kept a diary which her father found after the war. It's been translated into many languages and read by millions of people. And in it, Anne expressed her thoughts and her feelings with a maturity way beyond her young years. In one remarkable passage, this is what she wrote. She wrote, "It's twice as hard for us young people to hold our ground in a time when all ideals are being shattered and destroyed, when people are showing their worst side and do not know whether to believe in truth, in right, or in God. It's really a wonder that I haven't dropped all my ideals because they seem so absurd and impossible to carry out. Yet I keep them, because in spite of everything, I still believe that people are good at heart. I see the world being turned into a wilderness. I hear the ever-approaching thunder, which will destroy us. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet if I look up into the heaven, I think that it will all come right, and this cruelty too will end, and peace and tranquility will return again." What an amazing faith for such a young girl in such dire circumstances. And yet we all know that she never did see peace and tranquility return. She died in a concentration camp in 1944. But she endured in this faith till the very end. At the end of the gospel today, we hear that Jesus says to each one of us, "By your perseverance, you will secure your lives." In that gospel, Jesus was very forthright with his apostles. He talked about the thunder that Anne Frank wrote about, the thunder all around them, the wars, the revolutions, the earthquakes, the persecutions, the imprisonments, the betrayals, the hatred. But he told them that in times of darkness, light would be needed. In times of falsehood, truth is needed. In times of hatred, love is needed. In times of war, peace is needed. He told them that they would need wisdom and courage, that they would need staying power and endurance. And he told them not to be afraid. He told them that they would triumph in the end and not to give up. So the scriptures, as we come to the end of the church year, are all about the end times. And they challenge all of us to see the difficult, stressful times in our lives as opportunities to deepen our faith. Jesus tells us that faith can be born out of adversity, that faith can survive because of adversity. Now, you all might be surprised, but I did see a movie this week that was quite challenging. Robert Redford's All Is Lost. There's only one character in the movie. There's little or no dialogue. And Redford's character the name is Our Man. He's alone on a 39-foot sailboat in the middle of the Indian Ocean, and he has a freak accident. It's a story about you and me. It's a story about us when we confront the end of our lives and reflect upon what our lives have meant. Just like us, Robert Redford's character, Our Man, is vulnerable. He's vulnerable to the forces beyond his control and understanding. Just as Anne Frank worried about the thunder that she experienced all around her, thunder was a constant companion to Robert Redford as he drifted endlessly in the ocean. He endured injury and thirst and bone-numbing fatigue. His raft bobbed helplessly. He was like a veritable spot or dot in an endless sea. He was radically alone, and he was moving towards his fate. But he refused to give up. He met the challenge of the gospel this weekend. He does everything right. He repairs the hole in its damaged craft. He climbs the mast to restore power to his radio. He even figures out how to desalinate the seawater. He sends up flares to attract passing cargo ships, and he yells out in despair, "I'm here, I'm here." And when the end seems to be inescapable, he does stop the anxious striving. He writes a letter of regret. We don't know who he writes it to, but it's one of the only times we hear any dialogue in the whole movie. And this is what he writes: "I'm sorry. I know that means little at this point, but I am. I tried. I think you would agree that I tried to be true, to be strong, to be kind, to love, to be right, but I wasn't." We don't know anything about him, except that he is all of us. He seems to be a very decent man. He seems to have a strong character, trustworthy, but he's like you and me. He has his blunders, his betrayals, his weaknesses, and we know that he wishes that he had been more faithful to whoever he's writing this letter to. And he wants them to know that he did his best. And he closes the letter by saying, "I fought to the end. I'm not sure what that's worth, but I know that I did." Now, once again, I'm not going to give away the ending of this film because it's highly suggestive, and each moviegoer has to really come to his or her own interpretation. For those of us who believe, there's a highly theological interpretation, and the moviegoer can leave the film believing that all is not lost. Jesus, once again, in that gospel says, "By our perseverance, we will secure our lives." Well, much of life is about perseverance. It's about not giving up, but believing that all things will eventually work out for the good. Even in death, Anne Frank challenges us to never give in to despair. Never allow that thunder that rolls around us to overwhelm us. And even to this day, her words stay with us, that it is hard at times to hold our ground in a time when all ideals are being shattered and destroyed, when people are showing their worst side, and we do not know whether to believe in truth or in the right or in God. But as she wrote so many years ago, we must believe that tranquility and peace will reign in the end. Robert Redford's character, Our Man, shouts out, "I fought to the end. I'm not sure what that's worth, but I know I did." Perhaps that's the challenge for you and me as we come to the end of this church year and prepare ourselves for the Advent season. It's a wonderful time to reflect and ask ourselves some questions. Have we stayed in the race? Have we persevered? In spite of our blunders, our betrayals, our weaknesses, have we done our best? That's all God wants of us. Jesus consistently reminds us, all is not lost. All is never lost. Hold your ground.